Folks, thanks for looking at the podcast on the website for vabuddy.ca and vamitra.in. Both these websites will have this podcast uploaded to them, and we also have it uploaded on the YouTube channels for vabuddy.ca and vamitra.in. So we have James from Corpwright Consulting, who is the guest for today. He is a CBAP and he has been freelancing since 11 years at least, and he has an overall corporate experience of 22 plus years in business analysis. And I thought he would be a great addition to this podcast series where people would be able to understand how the industry works. And I'm really thankful to James to have agreed to this podcast. Welcome to the podcast, James. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
James, could you share your journey as a freelancer, how it started, what made you take this step, and the overall thought process behind it?
Sure. Yeah, I'm not sure it was an intentional journey. I think it just kind of came about on its own. I found that I was very curious in the work that I was doing. I wasn't always in a BA title, but the work was very BA-like. I seemed to balance between working in customer loyalty economics and then actual project BA. And I think a couple times I made changes, partly because I was looking for growth and opportunity, ready for more, and maybe where I was not really getting that opportunity, so I just had to need to look around a bit to find that. Right. And also just a couple times, my values weren't aligned with where I was working. I just wanted to be able to do things the way that I thought was right and ethical. And so sometimes you just feel like you need to make a change. And I found that as that went along, just different opportunities presented themselves, and eventually I got to, I've said before, I'd be a terrible business analyst if I wasn't able to analyze my own situation and think that was right for me. And eventually I just thought, I need to kind of take a shot at going on my own, and that model worked well for me, and so that's kind of how I ended up doing it.
Right. So, James, when you started off, did you have those options where you had an opportunity and then you started, contemplating whether to take it up, or was that a situation, or did you just decide, all right, this is the way to go, and then you started looking for opportunities?
Yeah, I think that you're looking at the key time of actually stepping out. I planned for a while. I thought, do I want to do this? Is it worth the risk? Can I do it? You see other people do it, and you think, well, if other people can, then I must be able to. So it's just a matter of figuring out how you go about it. And I talked to people that I respected, people that maybe had done something similar or had business perspectives, and they gave their advice. And I think some of the advice was wonderful. Some of it I might not have followed again. But I think that the important thing there was the things I leveraged to take a chance were I would recommend. Like I leveraged good relationships. I felt like I had done my best and produced quality work and behaved with ethical behaviors for long enough that when I reached out to people to say, hey, I'm thinking of doing this, do you think there'd be a place for me to work in your organization? That was received well. And so I think that was probably the most important thing. I'm getting ready to step out, was just having good relationships in place. And you're taking a chance. There's no doubt about it. That first step from walking away from an employee job to being on a contract, there's no guarantees. And so you want to make sure that the first opportunity looks okay, and that, you feel like maybe you have enough time to get started. Put a little bit aside so that you have a reserve to fall back on if you're in between contracts.
Yeah. You talked about the kind of uncertainty that we have. We do not know when we are contracting. We do not know where the next opportunity will be. How do you manage this uncertainty? Do you look for opportunities 3 or 6 months ahead of time, or what do you think? How do you handle that kind of situation?
Yeah, it kind of varies. I do plan ahead. I think that's the key. Is I'm always the minimum. Well, it's probably longer, but I communicate really well at least 3 months in advance. So if I'm working somewhere, and it's 3 months till the contract coming up, that's when I like to have really open, transparent dialogues with whoever I'm working with, just to understand, like, what is the forecast of the project? Do they intend to renew? Do they still need someone, right? It's always just understanding what their intentions are with you. And then I think you have to be willing to trust. There's a level of risk that you take, trusting that they're telling you the truth, or even that business won't change, right? Both those could happen. Someone might just change their mind, or the project might change, right? There's all those factors. But I like to go at least 3 months in advance. If they tell me their intentions just to carry on business, then I will just, stay steady, keep just doing the work and plow ahead. I don't generally like to take contracts that are 3 months or less, because that's when you start planning. And so as soon as you sign an extension or a contract, now you're talking, well, what are your intentions? And I just signed, right? So it's a little hard to plan that way, but 3 months to communicate. If you know that your time is coming to the end of the project, I feel it's important to honor that, to organize your upcoming work to let you finish what you're doing. I think that's part of building your reputation and your brand for just being reliable. But at 2 months, if I know I need to find work, that's at least when I'm really starting to look hard. It takes time to find an opportunity and to cultivate it and to bid on it and to close it, and it takes 2 months. So for me personally, I don't like to be in between contracts. I like to go from one to the next, and I like just to stay busy and to stay steady. So that's why I do it that way.
Right. Yeah. So, folks who are thinking about it, as James said, it's very uncertain, especially if you are looking at a public sector project. Things can change like that, and I think I've experienced that. Although I was not a contractor, I was employed with someone, but I do know how quickly things change when just like that. Not necessarily there's a reason behind it. Things could change just like that, and you could find yourself without a contract. So this is completely possible. James, I wanted to know if and how your CBAP designation helped with respect to getting more opportunities. At the same time, how was your skills enhanced after or while studying for the CBAP examination?
I think the first part of that, when I went out, the CBAP wasn't quite as mainstream as it is now, and I didn't have mine yet. It was something I pursued while I was, after I started on my own. It was a nice opportunity for me. I used the project I was on as kind of a guinea pig for a lot of the structure in the CBAP. So my activities didn't change a lot. The things I was doing was very similar. But the way that I tracked and organized and labeled things so that it was understood what skill set I was in, it became very clear and very well structured. I loved it. I know a lot of people don't like it can feel heavy, like a heavy structure, like there's a lot of process or protocol for maybe following some of it. But for me personally, I think it's really great. It helps me be diligent in the way I work through the different activities and prepare and deliver. So I did get mine partway through on my first contract, and I could not endorse it high enough. I think that it's become a standard. If you want to, especially as an independent, if you want to be out there independent, you need to have your CBAP to demonstrate that you know what you're doing.
And in terms of skills, James, to implement the things that you learned while going through a CBAP journey, is there something that you can tell potential candidates that this is where you should focus more, not just in terms of clearing the exam, but in terms of your business analysis work?
Yeah, I think that developing yourself and some of the supporting skills is definitely critical. I found that one course I loved was taking a facilitation course, just being an effective facilitator and how to really manage your sessions and the people and to make them as effective as possible. I found that to be invaluable. I did a lot of training on requirements documentation. I've got my preferences for how I think I can convey business needs to solution providers. I there's some that I don't love and there's some that I love. And so I think you figure that out as you go, what proves to be effective for you. And I think that spending time in training on exploring those different types of methods is good. You do need to be flexible. So if you're going to be out there on your own, you still need to be capable of adapting to wherever you're working and embracing their methods. So I think the spirit behind what you do doesn't change, but the way that you present it might change. And you just need to be really flexible with that. But those are probably two of my biggest ones. I think facilitation and documentation. I think it's smart to learn the trades of the people you work with the most. Have a bit of understanding there or expertise there. I think it's good to take some PM courses. OCM is another one I think is good. You're depending on project managers and change managers regularly, and I think just your ability to understand what they need and how, and the ability to make their lives easy by working well with them, I think that just goes a long way.
Do you see the expectations of a client? Is there a difference between when you're freelancing versus when you are, employed somewhere and you represent that organization? Is there something different?
I think so. I think they expect leadership. They're looking. The reason they brought you in the first place is because you're capable of producing at whatever level they need you. And in general, they're looking to you for leadership. They want someone who can take a look at the initiative or the opportunity and say, well, I get it. I get what we're trying to do. For this scenario, this would be the way that I would approach it, and come up with an effective strategy for how you're going to meet their business needs. I think that's important. You need to be able to understand it and speak to it at depth, explain why you want to do what you want to do. There has to be a reason behind it. But I think that's a big one. They want leadership, and I think it's not just in how you do your BA work, it's also the way you bring the team together and keep things interesting and light and fun, and that everybody feels part of it and stays engaged and contributes, and that's another form of leadership I think they're looking for as well.
For sure. And I think it's more of a direct feedback. So when you're doing everything on your own, you have the raw feedback from the client, be it everything from the administrative tasks to what your job entails. Everything is something you need to handle, everything. So I think it also helps in building the relationships, because then the client knows that if you are organized overall, that gives you a sense of, gives them a sense of, all right, I like this guy, I like this person, because this person is organized overall, not just in his work, but beyond that. So I think that's really something which kind of gives you an edge.
I think you hit the key there is relationships. And that's true whether you're an independent or an employee. I think that your reputation, that's your brand. If you're thinking about going on your own, your reputation needs to be really solid, because that's what's going to open doors for you, or help you network, or help you cultivate opportunities that are just less risky. I think that produce quality work, do a great job, and just make sure everything you do is putting the customer first. Don't operate in ways that are, don't try to embed yourself with them where they're stuck with you. Don't build solutions where they depend on you to make it work, because you always put their interests first and do the right thing for them. And they know that you're doing that, and they trust you. And I think that's part of your brand. And I think that's what leads to just having less risk and trying to stay out there and do work.
James, now when you are working for an organization versus when you're working on your own, how do you balance that, or rather, how do you ensure your professional development and certification upkeep? How do you balance that out? Because in an organization, there are initiatives that, all right, we need these many people to be certified in this particular area, and that's what drives the certifications. How do you manage that when you are freelancing?
I treat it a lot the same as if I'm an employee. Back then, I had annual things I needed to do, like work plans and growth plans and incentives and things like that. And that's really not much different than now. If I as an independent and, assessing myself as my own employee, I would be asking them, like, what are your goals? What's the development you need this year? What kinds of training do you need to pursue to stay not just current and, relevant, but also, in advance of things, trying to identify the trends that are coming. And if you're going to need a certain type of knowledge to kind of stay ahead of what like an elite in what you do, identify those things and just you got to plan for it the same way as if you're an employee. If you need a week of training, plan well ahead, set aside that budget for that training and just treat it the same way. And that's my opinion. And you need it anyway. You need to be doing those things to stay current in your trade and to keep your certification up. It's not really much different that way.
Yeah. What is the most important factor one needs to consider? And I agree with you that every situation is different. But what is that you have observed in these years that this is what stops people from climbing that wall of being a full-time employee to a freelancer?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not sure there's any just one thing to it. But if I were to pick out one, I would say just make sure you're ready. When you do get that opportunity, where it's your name on the line, you want to make sure that you've got all the skills and experience to walk in and really just do a high quality job. I think you'll want to be able to show leadership, your effectiveness, produce really quality work for them that is just ready for them to take and roll with. So if it's a short-term contract and it's been completed and they move along, they want to feel like you've left them in a really good space to thrive with what you've produced for them. I find that when you operate that way, that's what tends to lead to ongoing work. There's always work to do. And so when they find someone that they can trust that produces quality work, they're going to want to continue to work with you. So I'd say be ready. Make sure your skills are ready, your experience is ready. And if sometimes you can't be too choosy about your first opportunity, right? You're just trying to find an opportunity. But if you do get the chance to pick a good one, I think that's a great way to go. Having a contract that's at least 6 months, I think, is great because you get a chance to demonstrate your ability. If it's 3 months, you're just getting started. At 3 months, you're just establishing your planning and your strategy, and it's not much chance to demonstrate your work. So if you have a chance to pick your opportunity, great. If you have a chance to pick a client that has a good reputation and has good, ethical values, I think that's good too, because then you're aligned in the way you want to do work. Those are some things I'd look for. But number one, just be ready. And if you have relationships in place that you can leverage, that's good too.
For sure. As you said, you whether you are working full-time or you're freelancing, you are your brand. Your reputation is your brand. And if you make a good of it, I think opportunities will come to you rather than you looking for work. There will be always someone who refers it to somebody else and so on. And people would know eventually that, all right, this person does good work. We have a requirement. Let's check with them. If they are available, we can work something out.
It's not a bad idea to have some backup plans in there too.
Right.
I like to have things in place ahead of time if I need to draw on them. So an example is, one obstacle to getting to work somewhere is if they have a pre-approved vendor list. Those can be pretty tedious to qualify for and they take time. They don't come up very often. But when you have opportunities to apply to be a pre-approved vendor, I would do it because then you have the opportunity to work directly somewhere and your ability to be aware of what's coming and apply for things is high. You're very aware. Sure. But your backup plan to that is if you're not on a vendor list for some places that have produced a lot of opportunities, find a good vendor that you can subcontract through. But look for one with a great reputation. Like you want to have really positive ethical relationships there where you can you're both happy with the arrangement and it's sustainable that way. And I guess the last part of my backup plan would be, if I wasn't able to find a contract even through subcontracting, well, then I guess I'd be ready to look for a job. But it's never really gotten to that. It's that's always there, right? But it's just not something I've had to turn to.
check out our bootcamp over the weekends. Everything is updated on the website. Do check it out. It's a 2-day bootcamp for CCBA and CBAP preparation. Sorry, James, I had to advertise that. This is my opportunity to do. So moving on with the podcast, and this is good stuff, James. Thanks again. How has the role of technology played in your ability to succeed as a freelance BA? I mean, essentially, you're running a business. This is a business where you have to handle all the aspects. You have to handle the admin, operations, even HR, for that matter. You have to manage your time. How has technology helped you?
I think there's a mix there. The technology, you need to invest in what you're doing to make sure you're prepared. I've made sure that my equipment is, well, it's fine, my computer crashed during this interview, but in general, my equipment's extremely reliable, and I have the tools that I need to make sure I can facilitate online or elicit online without having any hiccups or problems. I think during COVID, that was a real game changer for a lot of work. It demonstrated that we have the tools and the technology that you can be just as effective remote as you can in a room with a whiteboard. There's not much that I can't do from here with all the tools available to me that I can't do in the room. I think the only thing that's maybe limiting is I can't read the body language of someone who's maybe, showing signs of dysfunction in a session that you can address and mitigate, right? But if the cameras are on, you can generally manage that too. You can read the expressions and understand. Otherwise, I think that the technology has really opened it up. My ability now to work for good partners is not just, where I can drive to in 10 minutes. It can be anywhere now. And I think I'd say I've been working remote now for close to 5 years. And it's there's a lot of real benefits, and I think it's for not just for me, but it's also for the client. They get more time and more availability and so on. So you mentioned technology. I think that you need to invest in your equipment, make sure you're just top notch. And I think that the other aspects that you mentioned, like HR and your own professional development and those things, you're running a business. If there's things that you can do for yourself and keep your costs down, that's great. But sometimes it's appropriate to spend on an accountant or a lawyer, to help you make some decisions on how you structure your company and so on. But I think you need to be prepared to treat it like a business. That those are the things you're going to do.
If you treat it like a business, it adds to that little bit of professionalism to your conduct, whether you're offline, online with a client, or you're sending an email. You have to ensure that you maintain that professionalism if you treat it as a business. As you mentioned about remote working, and I agree with you, after COVID, things have changed so dramatically. Do you think you would prefer the collaborative environment of a office versus remote work? Which one would you prefer?
I think that we probably have our different preferences based on our personality types and how we like to work. But I think as professionals, you just have to be ready to adapt to both. For me personally, I find it is a mix. I think there are times you need to be on site and in person for certain things. If you're bringing on a solution provider, let's say you selected someone who's going to provide a product to you as your solution, that onboarding time can be critical. You might need to be in a room to build those relationships and establish how you're going to work together, and kind of laying the groundwork for how you're going to be highly effective over the next several months while you're working remote and doing things over a distance. So I think sometimes you need to see that that's important and be there. I think other times, day to day, if you show your effectiveness in working remote through sessions like this, I think that turns out to be a win. It's good for the client because their costs are down, right? They're not paying for your space, and then they're probably paying for some of your equipment, but not all of your equipment. So it's good for them, and I think it's good for them too that your flexibility to give them more time and more, hours is good for them, and it's good for me. It lets me be flexible and prioritize my time the way that I want to as well.
And talking about AI, once again, I'm going to advertise something, James, on this podcast. Folks, the course that you take up with BABuddy.ca or BAMethod.in, whether it's ACBA, CCBA, or CBAP course. It comes with an AI chatbot, which is trained in the Babok, and at the same time, it's trained in a lot of other materials. It will help you create case studies. It will help you answer your queries related to business analysis. It will also help gauge your understanding of a certain topic and help you with the feedback around it. So do not forget to check that out. Also, as James mentioned earlier, a BA, you may be basically, your title may not be a BA, but you may already be doing certain things which are related to business analysis. And if you're someone who is thinking of getting into business analysis but do not have the title of a BA, please don't forget to check out the other podcast that we have on the website, which says you may already be a BA, but you may just not know it. So do not forget to check that podcast. Back to the podcast, James. Advertisement. That was the last advertisement.
It's all good.
As we can see, remote opportunities are dwindling. They are reducing day by day. People want a hybrid approach. Now, as a freelancer, you are based in a certain city, and changing cities or provinces is not the easiest thing. When you have challenges like this, where there's an opportunity for you that you want to bid on, however it's in a different city, and they're asking for hybrid work, and that has been a general perception where people prefer a local candidate over someone who is hundreds of miles away. How do we, as a freelancer, how do we balance that workload where you might see an opportunity but you just can't bid for it, and you have to sit without an opportunity for a couple of months? How do you manage that in terms of the mental pressure that you have, at the same time the workload?
Yeah, that's a hard one. I can speculate on it, but I haven't really experienced that, to be honest. I've found that there's been enough demand for BAs reasonably close to me. I have taken some remote work, like when I worked with you, for instance, that I had a 3-hour time difference at times there. But you plan for that, right? With the 3 hours isn't too bad, because you have so much of your workday that overlaps, and you can prioritize that time for all that collaborative activity. But if it means shifting your life a bit to get up a little bit earlier or stay a little bit later, for me personally, it needs to fit in with my life balance and my priorities. If it's going to affect my family, or then I will be a little more cautious in choosing a situation like that. But I haven't experienced a lot of that. I found that, like when I worked with you, because we were so effective within those core hours, it was no big deal for me to be doing some work when other people were done for the day. Or, on certain days, well, we just need you in this meeting, so I'd be up an hour early or 2 hours early just to get into something. But I think you need to make your personal call on, how does this affect my life balance, my priorities? Is it sustainable? If I'm making some sacrifices here and there, that's okay, but is it sustainable? So for me, I do prefer to try and, at least in my time zone, if I can stay in my time zone so that we're all kind of starting work and I work at the same time, then that helps. If I need to travel to be on site a bit, is it sustainable? If I have to drive an hour and a half to attend some sessions, and now I'm, an hour and a half home, so I've really kind of lost 3 hours of my working day.
Yeah, for sure.
How do I manage that? How do I make sure it stays in control? And I think it's just communication. I've been lucky that my communication with my partners has been really good, and we're very good at just compromising with each other.
All right. Once again, people management, folks. How your relationships are with the client, how your brand reputation is. That is how your reputation is, how flexible you are in terms of working, how adaptable you are in terms of what the client demands you. This is all about business analysis. I'll thank James once again for being a part of this podcast. It was so useful. Lots and lots of information.